You must have noticed that when the Afghan Taliban started small-scale attacks against the United States and its Afghan allies, at that time videos of those attacks were not seen on social media. But after 2007, suddenly videos of almost every major attack carried out by the Taliban started appearing. Let us tell you, this was not a coincidence. This was a story. The story was that the Leadership Council, also known as the Quetta Shura, used to send money to the fighting fronts under it. But at the same time, they also demanded that proper accounts of that money be submitted to the Finance Commission of the Quetta Shura. In addition, the local commanders and governors controlling smaller fronts were also required to send a portion of zakat funds and war booty from their areas to the Shura of Quetta. But as usually happens, fighters were not good at maintaining proper accounts, so there were major discrepancies in the financial records. The Quetta Shura was not satisfied with this. That is why in 2008 an important decision was made. All fighting units were ordered to record videos of their attacks and operations and publish or sell them so that they can justify the funds given to them. Groups like Al-Qaeda were already doing this. You must have seen such videos on television and on the internet of attacks, suicide bombings and explosions. These videos helped fighters in propaganda and helped leadership estimate how much money each front was spending and whether it was justified. After this decision, videos of Taliban attacks became common. Before that, this trend did not exist much, except to some extent by Mullah Dadullah, who mainly recorded training and suicide bomber videos rather than actual operations. At the same time, while the Taliban were becoming more organized and gaining local support, there was an internal conflict within the American establishment. You can understand it as two parts: the White House and the Pentagon. The White House and State Department wanted reconstruction of Afghanistan, financial aid, building an army and establishing democracy so that Taliban and Al-Qaeda would not return. Their view was that if the U.S. left Afghanistan too early, extremist groups would regroup. On the other hand, the Pentagon, led by Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld, believed that their job was already done. The Taliban government had been removed and Al-Qaeda disrupted. They argued that there was no need to spend more money and that the US should withdraw quickly. This internal conflict benefited Afghan warlords, whom the Pentagon supported. Instead of strengthening the Afghan government and army, the Pentagon started giving millions of dollars to warlords and hiring them for operational tasks. Meanwhile, the State Department failed to convince President George Bush to fully support Hamid Karzai's government. As a result, Karzai struggled even for basic funds. His authority was largely limited to Kabul. At that time, Karzai hoped the US would help build and strengthen Afghanistan. He gathered educated Afghans from around the world in Kabul to run government institutes, believing that without quick stabilization, Taliban and Al-Qaeda would return. Among those returning Afghans was a 52-year-old economist educated in Beirut and a former World Bank employee. Despite serious illness, he wanted to serve his country. His name was Ashraf Ghani, and he was appointed finance minister. Afghanistan had virtually no economy, no industries, no services, and no significant exports. The only major crop was opium, which was illegal. In April 2002, President Bush had promised a Marshall Plan for Afghanistan, similar to post World War II Europe, but this plan was never implemented. As a result, Karzai and Ghani turned to European countries for help, but they were reluctant since the US itself was not fully supporting Afghanistan. Eventually, it became nearly impossible for Karzai to get insufficient aid. Even minor assistance for government offices came from the United Nations. Meanwhile, warlords dominated Afghanistan. For example, Ismail Khan controlled eastern provinces with Herat as his base. Northern Afghanistan was divided between Muhammad Fahim and Abdul Rashid Dastom. These warlords had private armies and ruled their regions independently. When the US partnered with them for intelligence against Al-Qaeda and the Taliban, many warlords used this opportunity to settle personal and tribal scores. They provided false information in exchange for money, sometimes targeting their own enemies. For example, in Uruzgan province in July 2002, US airstrikes killed civilians instead of militants, including 54 people at a wedding. Another strike killed around 80 civilians. According to Global Exchange, 812 people were killed in June 2002 air and drone strikes. Most of them were civilians. These incidents damaged US credibility. Many warlords also maintained relationships with multiple countries simultaneously. Dostum had ties with Turkey and Russia, while Ismail Khan and Karim Khalili received support from Iran. Ismail Khan's story is particularly notable. A former Afghan army captain, he rebelled in 1979 against Soviet-backed forces, briefed, captured Herat, but Soviet bombing destroyed the capacity. He later joined the Mujahideen and continued fighting. After 2001, he became governor of Herat. As governor, he controlled the Islam Kala border crossing with Iran, collecting heavy taxes from trade. This revenue went into his own treasury instead of the central government. Similarly, other warlords controlled border crossings and earned huge amounts. The US was aware but allowed this situation to continue. Many warlords also profited through contracts supplying US bases, often overcharging heavily. Despite criticism, the Pentagon defended these warlords, claiming they had local support, although in reality they were strengthened by US backing. President Bush had given the CIA and Defense Department full freedom in Afghan policy, focusing mainly on defeating Al-Qaeda rather than rebuilding Afghanistan. As a result, reconstruction efforts failed and public resentment grew, indirectly benefiting the Taliban. Later, the Taliban intensified their operations again. Friends, many aspects of this war are still not widely known, but now books and interviews, especially with Taliban representatives in Qatar, are revealing more details. Similarly, interviews of US and Afghan officials have also been published, providing further insight into these events.